Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed at 1,000 subscribers. I'll be posting a special video. Fists hammered my door and rattled the chain. I'm Alex and I'm 29 and frozen. The peephole went black like a thumb pressed hard. Open up, a low voice ordered right against the wood. I held the bolt and counted to 3, then waited. Alex, it's me at the door. Unlock this before they catch me. The voice shook and then flattened into urgency. I checked the chain lengths with my thumb. Another hit pushed the screws and called my bluff. I cracked the door an inch and met his eyes. My brother slipped through sideways and through the lock. He killed the light with 2 quick taps. Breath rushed out of him like he'd outrun something. They tailed me from the corner. Don't talk. Footsteps scraped outside and paused by my doormat. A knuckle tested the metal and withdrew without knocking. Turn the water on loud now. He mouthed it with eyes burning. I moved to the bathroom and twisted the shower. Steam rose fast and swallowed his heavy breathing. My phone buzzed on the counter and flashed unknown. A text popped up with my name and address. He grabbed the phone and shook his head once. Do not answer, they spoof everything. He slid the phone back and watched the door. The handle twisted gently and held there too long. I stepped close and kept pressure on the bolt. Wrong door, I called, voice steady while my palms sweat. Silence answered first and then a low whisper. 2 sets of footsteps retreated to the stairwell. He scanned my coat hooks and reached for the keys. I pocketed them first and met his stare. I need a jacket and a cap, he muttered. I pulled an old jacket and watched his hands. He checked the lining and slipped something small inside. I heard a clink like plastic against a zipper. He turned his back and kept moving without explanation. Water pounded the tub and masked our whispers. The apartment felt smaller by the second and hotter. He opened the cabinet and shoved the jacket under towels. The elevator chimed and a shadow crossed my threshold. I peered through the peephole and saw a man. He cupped his phone and spoke without raising volume. Another figure joined him and scanned the hallway. They waited like delivery guys who knew my schedule. My door camera pinged and sent a grainy thumbnail. The clip showed their shoes at my welcome mat. One boot turned and pointed at my neighbor's door. He nodded and tucked something back into his pocket. They looked like patience, not panic, and kept waiting. My building chat lit up with short, furious messages. Someone wrote that 2 strangers were casing doors. Another asked if anyone had called security yet. My brother walked out dripping and held his side. He flinched at the chat preview and then grinned. They will get bored if we wait, he whispered. I stared at the door and tried to believe that. Another text arrived with my unit number and name. I turned the phone face down and breath shallow. He took the phone again and wiped his fingerprints. He asked for a trash bag and watched my reaction. I shook my head and stepped between him and cabinets. He rolled his eyes and reached for the jacket. A thin rectangle flashed from the lining and glinted. He stuffed it deeper and zipped the pocket closed. The elevator chimed again and then stopped on my floor. This time the shadow stayed and blocked the peephole. A soft knock came and a folded note slid under. I picked it up and read one line slowly. Call me if you want this done quietly. He watched my face and reached for the note. I kept it and stared at the number. They are bluffing, burn it, he urged. I crumpled it and set it on the stove. The paper browned and curled while the hallway hushed. There was a new sound at the door lock. A small tool scratched and ticked without rhythm. I palmed a hammer and planted my feet. He lifted the jacket and checked the pocket again. We stood still while the door held and the tool quit. He leaned close and whispered that he needed time. Not hours, just minutes before any choice got made. I nodded and felt the hammer bite my palm. He headed back to the bathroom and turned music on. Water roared again while something small clicked inside fabric. The peephole cleared and the hallway emptied at last. I exhaled and reached for the light switch. He shouted no and slapped my wrist hard. We stayed in the half-dark and listened hard. Something scraped once more outside and then vanished. He stepped out with the jacket zipped and eyes sharp. He asked for a couch and a night to breathe. I wanted answers and got a promise of later. I nodded once while the shower thundered like cover. I laid a blanket out and kept the hammer nearby. He stretched on the couch and closed one eye. I watched his pocket rise and fall with each breath. Somewhere inside that jacket a secret rested and waited. I had no idea how badly it would cost me. The buzzer jolted me up before sunrise. Water still thundered. In the bathroom as cover. He snored once and tightened his grip on the couch. I grabbed the intercom and waited for the voice. Delivery for Alex, the tone sounded too flat. Then a softer pitch slid in, "Open up, sweetheart." My thumb hovered over the release and shook. I checked the door cam and saw nothing useful. I nudged him with my knuckles and pointed down. He sat up fast and cut a sharp no. My chest thumped once like a warning I ignored. I hit the release and heard the lobby unlock. Footsteps climbed hard and quick, no pauses between landings. I slipped the chain free and lifted the latch. She swept in first and hugged like a choke. Her gaze mapped the room and nailed my brother. "Turn that noise down," she moved to the bathroom. Music blasted louder instead, drowning the hallway completely. They pressed foreheads in the steam and whispered fragments. I caught one word through the splash: transfer. I checked the viewer and saw a shape linger. Not the same pair from last night, posture different. The figure leaned into the door and sniffed for movement. I backed away and lifted my hand for quiet. She reappeared with steady breath and a new plan. "One night here, then we move." Her palms opened. He adjusted his coat and kept one pocket shielded. I asked what changed and watched their eyes dodge. The buzzer screamed again with impatient stabs. "Building office here," a clipped voice pressed for entry. "Leak reported from your unit." Metal tapped in the stairwell. She pointed me to answer while she rearranged cushions. I stepped into the hall and pulled the door nearly shut. A man in a maintenance vest checked his tablet. He asked about water and guests on this floor. I lied on instinct and kept my body angled. Behind me, fabric rustled and something thumped into hiding. The vest glanced at my door and frowned once. "Turn the shower off within 5 minutes." His jaw clicked. He walked away without looking back, which felt wrong. My phone blinked with a clean unknown number. A photo arrived of my doormat with a timestamp. Another followed with my unit printed on a slip. The text that came next read 18 minutes left. She took the phone from my hand and scrolled. Her thumb flew and then the thread vanished. "Stop feeding them." She handed it back cold. I asked who them meant and got silence. "All devices on the table now." I tried command. He placed a cheap handset and smirked at me. She set down a second one and watched me. I added mine and raised my eyebrows for more. He patted his jacket and adjusted the hem. "That stays on me." His voice turned hard. She cut him a look that stripped the bravado. He unclipped a micro card and slid it over. I closed my fist and felt its tiny edges. "We keep this until you leave." My rule landed. He clicked his tongue and drifted toward the couch. She stood between us like a drawn line. The intercom buzzed again with a new cadence. "Package returned for Unit 12. The script felt practiced. I walked to the lens and covered it fully. "Wrong unit." My voice carried flat and final. Her hand brushed my elbow once and tightened. "You still have the spare fob for downstairs." I told her no and she stared like a blade. I cracked and fetched the extra from a drawer. She pocketed it and kissed my cheek lightly. "Insurance." She made it sound like a favor. He rolled his shoulders and checked the hallway through curtains. The corridor stayed empty, but the silence felt staged. My lock vibrated, not picking, more like a test. I lifted a length of pipe from beside the frame. She counted down with fingers in the air, 3 to 1. The vibration stopped on 1 and my palms burned. Her phone flashed with a short, bright alert. She turned the screen away and forced a smile. "We need a ride at noon." No softening there. I asked where and she only tapped the pocket. I called in sick without sharing a reason. A pause hit the line and then approval came. He listened while tying his laces too tight. The knot broke and slapped his wrist red. The building chat lit with a flood of pings. "Strangers on 5, door handles checked last night." I typed a quick response and defended our floor. Screenshots hit back with my doormat circled twice. She poured 2 short cups and pushed one over. I left it untouched and watched the surface settle. Tonight we clear this, she wiped her mouth. He nodded once and kept eyes on the time. A car horn blipped 3 times down the block. She raised the fob and blinked with each beat. He slipped out and ghosted the stairwell without words. I counted 30 and locked both bolts hard. She leaned on the counter and kept breathing measured. Trust me and you survive this week, no smile now. I stared at the micro card tunneling into my palm. Somewhere outside a camera turned and found my door again. Elevator doors parted and a forearm blocked my path. She stopped behind me and slid the S. Pair fob away. Change of plan, she breathed, eyes fixed on the lobby. A man waited by the exit with a folded backpack. He watched our shoes and checked the stairwell mirror. Walk past and turn right, she murmured without blinking. We moved as one and counted 5 slow steps. The man followed at 2 lengths and never looked up. At the corner she cut left and pressed my wrist. Bathroom key from the cafe, she whispered through her teeth. I pushed inside and held the door with my foot. She pulled the trash bin aside and tapped the tile twice. A loose square tilted and revealed a narrow gap. She pulled a thin roll wrapped in tape and rubber. He stashed this yesterday, she said, mouth barely moving. I slid the micro card inside the roll and paused. Close it, she urged, pulse beating in her throat. We sealed the pocket and reset the tile in place. The door creaked and a shadow crossed the floor. I flushed the toilet and wiped my hands clean. We exited separately with a long breath between us. She nodded at the crosswalk and kept her shoulders square. The man stepped out with a coffee and patience. A second figure checked a rideshare screen and glanced up. Keep moving, she said, jaw tight and steps even. We joined a crowd and let bodies hide our shapes. Her arm brushed mine and then dropped away. 2 blocks later, she angled toward a pharmacy entrance. Inside, she headed for the photo counter and waited. Pick up for Nolan, she told the clerk without turning. An envelope slid across with a signature line. She pushed it to me and held her breath. I signed and pocketed the contents without reading. She did not ask to see them yet. Back exit, she muttered, hands casually loose. We slipped through a stock door and hit the alley. Feet pounded the far end and then slowed deliberately. She lifted the fob and pressed twice in the air. A compact car blinked and unlocked near the gate. Drive, she said, already crouched low in the seat. I pulled into traffic and checked the mirror once. The backpack man stepped outside and made a call. Another car rolled from the curb and matched our speed. She dug a phone from her sleeve and typed hard. Next turn right, she ordered, voice steady and light. Then straight to the old garage on Fulton. I followed and felt the tail hesitate behind a truck. She tucked the fob away and counted down under breath. We slid into the garage and killed the engine. She directed me to a locked stairwell door. Her knuckles rapped a short pattern that sounded rehearsed. It opened a crack and a narrow face appeared. 50 seconds, the face murmured without greeting. We stepped in and the door clanked shut. She unrolled the taped bundle onto a steel tray. A portable reader blinked awake and waited for contact. I placed the micro card and held my breath. Numbers cascaded on the tiny screen and then froze. Transfer path OK, the narrow face whispered, fingers quick. Destination requires a second factor and a clean line. She pushed the pharmacy envelope across the tray. Inside lay a new SIM and a brief instruction. Use this now and do not call out, she warned. The narrow face popped the tray phone and swapped cards. The device chimed and requested a code immediately. Her eyes darted to me and then to nothing. A message arrived on my personal screen with 6 digits. Read it, she snapped, palms flat and impatient. I spoke the numbers while the reader processed. Green flashed once and the transfer bar crawled. The stairwell beyond hummed like someone waited there. The narrow face bit a cuticle and watched the meter. 30 seconds to completion, the face whispered toward the floor. Doors are not safe longer than 2 minutes. A clatter echoed above us like keys dropped twice. I gripped the tray and glanced at the handle. The bar hit full and the reader pinged softly. The narrow face tore the SIM out and crushed it. She rolled the tape back around the empty bundle. Done, the face breathed, eyes darting to the door. We stepped into the corridor and the air shifted. Two men climbed down slow with casual expressions. She smiled like a neighbor and lifted the car fob. Lost something, she asked, tone bright and sharp. One reached for his belt and paused when I stared. My hands lifted empty while my weight shifted forward. She walked first with controlled pace and no shake. They let us pass and followed 2 steps behind. Outside, we merged into the noon rush and vanished. She tugged me left and then stopped dead. Our car idled where we left it, doors locked again. A boot print marked the driver's side and told a story. New ride, she whispered, scanning for cameras and lines. I checked pockets and felt the pharmacy envelope. She saw the edge and squeezed my elbow once. That stays with you until midnight. We cut across the street and waved down a cab. The driver grunted and kept eyes on the meter. She fed him an address I had never heard. I watched the mirror and caught the backpack man reappearing. At the next light, he broke into a jog. She touched my knee and shook her head slightly. Not home, she said, voice low and decisive. Not today, not until we finish this. The cab braked hard and my phone vibrated twice. A new text flashed across roads I did not know. Behind us, a scooter weaved through cars and held distance. She tapped the glass twice and told the driver to cut left. We bailated at the next corner and kept walking. She did not look back and I matched her pace. Block and a half, she breathed, chin down and steady. The scooter idled near a hydrant and kept its engine ready. She led me into a self-storage office with broken blinds. A keypad waited with a stickered number I did not recognize. She entered 6 digits fast and hit pound with her knuckle. The door groaned open and swallowed us with a loud click. Inside smelled of dust and metal and recent rain. She counted doors softly and stopped at row C. A lock hung there and blinked like a small eye. She pressed my wrist to calm me and rapped 3 times. The latch popped from inside and my brother slid it back. His lip was scabbed and one sleeve torn at the seam. On times, he murmured, then checked the corridor without blinking. 4 crates sat stacked and strapped tight like waiting sleepers. Where is the chip now? He kept his hands open. I tapped the envelope in my jacket and watched him swallow. Not until I know I am not bait, my mouth dried. He flicked his gaze to her and lifted his chin. Footsteps scraped outside and a deadbolt clanked on the main door. 2 men filled the hall and blocked the exit without talking. One held a phone inches from his cheek and listened. Healy? F'd a finger and the other stared at our shoes. The phone hit speaker and a voice came through clipped. Move the rest, then hand over the second key. She stared at my pocket and did not blink. You finish your part first, she shot back and cracked her knuckles. Proof, the voice sounded bored and certain and close. She took out the device from Fulton and woke the display. A green bar shimmered across and then dimmed to idle. The 2 in the hall leaned in and smelled victory. Final code now plus the package in Nolan's name. She tilted her head toward me and kept her tone flat. I loosened the flap and felt a plastic disc inside. I held it up and waited for someone to flinch. My brother stepped forward and reached without warning. I pivoted and the disc slipped half from my fingers. He caught only air and crashed into the crates. One split and spilled plates with fresh numbers stamped deep. The hall men reacted like magnets hitting steel. One scooped a plate and pocketed it behind his jacket. The other lifted a crowbar and smiled with no humor. No one leaves empty, he muttered and kicked the doorstop. She planted herself between me and the crowbar swing. Open the back gate and you get the disc, she threw. Crowbar paused midair and hunger replaced anger in his eyes. The phone on speaker hissed silence and then clicked dead. He motioned to the far end and jerked his chin. A steel grate slid higher with a grinding whine. The scooter engine outside rose and fell like a lure. I tucked the disc under my tongue and felt my pulse. Enough games, my brother snapped and grabbed my collar. She chopped his forearm down and drove him into the wall. He shouted and something small clattered across the concrete. It skittered under a rack and stopped near a leaking pipe. The hall men tensed as a new knock hit metal. A key fumbled at the main entrance and turned twice. The backpack watcher stepped in with 2 uniforms trailing. Their eyes swept the corridor and landed on the plates. Noise complaint, one uniform announced with a voice like granite. All units open, all hands visible now. Crowbar dropped behind a duffel and smiled polite and wide. She brushed my sleeve and whispered, "Run on 3." She flashed her fingers and I nodded once. On 2, she shoved the crate stack toward the corridor. Metal screamed and the uniform stepped back instinctively. We cut left for the service stairs and jumped the last 2. My brother pounded behind us and yelled, "Wait," loudly. He reached for the disc and I shouldered him away. He stumbled and swung wild and missed by inches. We burst into a side alley and hit sunlight hard. The scooter blocked the mouth of the alley and revved. The rider lifted his visor and showed calm, practiced eyes. She walked straight at him and raised my spare key. "Trade," she offered, and the visor eyes flickered once. He took the key and pointed to a delivery truck. "Driver door open," he murmured with a gloved finger. "2 minutes clear if you turn right now." He pocketed the key and rolled away like a ghost. We climbed into the truck and found it already idling. I pulled us into traffic and felt my throat burn. In the mirror, my brother ran after us and waved. Something silver flashed in his hand and made my grip tighten. "Do not stop," she warned and braced her feet. "He will bring that home if you slow." I accelerated and watched him shrink between buses and vans. He turned away and vanished down a side street. She faced me and tapped the inside of my cheek. "Spit," she ordered and held a napkin like a medic. I pushed the disc out and let it drop. She folded it once and slid it under the mat. "Next stop is the courthouse basement," she breathed calmly. "Window 4, no names, straight exchange when they buzz." I swallowed hard and checked the side streets for tails. The uniforms would reach my door before we did anything else. She placed her palm over mine and pressed firm. "Home is burned," she said with no tremor. "We finish this now or we lose everything." I turned right and hoped the clock liked our chances. Security blocked the ramp and waved us to public entry. We ditched the truck near the hydrant and risked a ticket. She grabbed my sleeve and pulled me toward the courthouse steps. "Basement door left of screening, move now." A marshal eyeballed our clothes and scanned for weapons. She raised empty hands and pointed to my shoes. "Nothing metal," her voice stayed even and quick. We slid through screening while the line argued behind us. Stairs dropped to a low corridor with numbered windows. 4 sat dark with a single red dot blinking. She knocked twice on the glass and leaned close. The dot turned green and a metal drawer slid out. "Token only, no names, no chatter," a speaker crackled. She placed the folded napkin on the tray and paused. "Verification first," she lifted her chin at me. I reached under the mat, memory info. "On the wafer." I set it down and the drawer retracted with a snap. A reading tone rose, steady and clinical and slow. Boots thudded behind us and the air got tight. I glanced back and saw my brother at the landing. He limped, jaw clenched, eyes locked on the window. 2 plainclothes hovered near him and pretended to stretch. "Step away from the counter," his voice cut like cable. She edged closer to me and didn't look back. The speaker popped again with a clipped instruction. "Await code, do not leave the line." My brother smiled without warmth and shifted his stance. "Codes get lost when family snatches things." I faced the glass and fought to keep still. She tapped my heel twice like a metronome for patience. "Hear the tone and hand me the slip." I nodded and watched the red dot pulse. The plainclothes split and fanned across the corridor. One studied the vending machine like it owed money. The other admired a faded flyer and checked reflections. My brother drifted until he blocked our only exit. An alarm burped once from upstairs and then stopped. The counter light flickered as the reader finished. A small ticket spat out with 4 digits printed. I snatched it and tucked it under my wristband. "Release the token to claimant only," the speaker chimed. She looked at my brother and then to the glass. "Claimant is present," she tilted her head toward me. He laughed and showed empty hands to the ceiling. A bailiff rounded the corner and measured the scene. "Queue stays clear, keep the aisle open." My brother lifted a shoulder and drifted a half step. The plainclothes softened their posture and widened their angle. "Window 3 is open for filings," the bailiff added. The plainclothes ambled there, but eyes stayed with us. My brother cracked his knuckles and fixed on my wrist. "Hand me the slip and walk away." She blocked him with a single sharp move. You walk first, her jaw barely moved under the words. He smirked and reached for my pocket instead. I pivoted right and his fingers scraped denim. The window hissed and unlocked a side door. Recipient access for 10 seconds, the speaker informed us. She shoved me through and held the frame with both arms. My brother lunged and jammed his foot in the gap. I pushed while she hammered his ankle with her heel. He grunted and yanked free and slammed the door hard. We stumbled into a compact office with one desk. A clerk watched us like a referee who liked ties. Slip, the clerk extended an open palm toward me. I produced the ticket and kept my eyes on the door. She inhaled once and rolled her shoulders back. The clerk scanned the digits and unlocked a safe. The wafer reappeared in a new evidence pouch. Exchange requires matching phrase, the clerk recited without blinking. She looked at me and tilted her head left. I felt a phrase crawl up and stick in my throat. Quiet arrangements, fast exit, my voice shook and still carried. The clerk nodded and slid a second pouch across. Inside sat a sealed envelope labeled with a short code. She pocketed it and tapped the desk twice. The door shuddered like something heavy smashed into it. Time to go, the clerk warned with no sympathy. I braced for the hallway and the clerk hit a switch. A hidden panel popped and revealed a narrow passage. We slipped into the passage and counted 6 steps. It spilled into a records alcove with an elevator call. She stabbed the down button and stared at the numbers. Footfalls swarmed the other side of the wall. The car arrived with a dull clunk and opened slow. We entered and she jammed her thumb on sublevel 2. The doors began to close and a hand knifed through. My brother forced the gap and shoved himself inside. He panted once and then smiled at the floor indicator. Drop me at 1 and we talk there. She stared at his sleeve and then at his belt. No weapon visible, just nerves and stubborn pride. New rules, she lifted her forearm and blocked him gently. Hands high until we stop, she stepped closer and waited. He complied with a resentful twitch and stared at me. Give me the pouch and I walk away. The elevator slowed and a camera stared from the corner. She pointed up and then made a calm choice. Make your offer to the lens, keep it clean. He looked up, read the room, and chose silence. The doors parted onto a concrete hallway with 2 options. A metal door flashed an exit sign and a badge reader. A narrow tunnel angled toward a loading bay with noise. She guided us into the tunnel and kept her pace steady. Halfway down, he tried for my pocket again. I twisted his wrist and bounced him against the wall. He dragged me forward and we hit the floor hard. She planted a knee and pried us apart with urgency. Enough, she snapped the word and it stuck. Walk or I leave you to them. He glanced back toward the elevator and swallowed pride. Fine, but I want half of whatever that buys. We reached the bay and found a line of custody carts. 2 clerks argued over signatures and ignored everyone else. She slid the envelope into a battery compartment and closed it. Follow me exactly or lose the trail. We drifted past the carts and onto a ramp. A city van reversed toward the dock with a beep. She waved the driver forward and pointed to a clipboard. The driver sighed and jumped out to reposition. Now she tugged me under the van and across. We emerged behind a pillar and caught our breath. My brother crawled after us with gravel on his cheek. Shouts rose from the tunnel and echoed toward the dock. Plainclothes sprinted in to the bay and split 2 ways. The bailiff appeared at their backs with 2 more marshals. The driver yelled about trespassing and threw his hands up. She shoved me toward a stairwell labeled maintenance. We flew down the steps and hit another corridor. A keypad blocked the next door and waited for magic. She pulled a sticker from her cuff and pressed it on. The lock chirped once and opened like we belonged. Inside, a single counter faced a teller slot. A tiny sign read deposits by appointment only. She placed the evidence pouch on the steel and knocked. A woman slid the hatch back and raised one eyebrow. Window 4 referral, she kept her words crisp and simple. Short code HN23, immediate deposit, issue receipt. The woman scanned the pouch and tapped a pad. Acceptable, you want naming or number only? Number only, she answered with a dry throat. The woman printed a slip and stamped the time. Keep this safe, redemption requires this exact sheet. She pushed it toward us and shut the hatch. My brother stared at the slip like it grew teeth. That is worth less than what I risked. She folded the paper and tucked it under her tongue. Not to the people who want it back. Footsteps rolled past the door and then faded. We listened still, pressed to the wall with tense shoulders. He peered through the wired glass and cursed softly. Two outside, one upstairs, none in the stairwell. Then we move, she cracked the door a finger. No one waited within arm's reach, only echo and hum. We stepped out and turned left toward a service lift. It opened without a call, like someone watched us. A janitor stood inside with earbuds and a bored stare. Which floor? He chewed gum and never met our gaze. She held up 3 fingers and then 2. Take us to 3, then keep going down. He shrugged and hit a button and resumed chewing. The doors closed and the lift started its rise. My brother wiped his lip and studied my shoes. He whispered low so only I could hear. They will come to your job and to your landlord. They will make you choose before sunset. Pick us now and you get a shield later. His smile didn't reach his eyes and I looked away. The doors opened to a quiet corridor with vending. She stepped out, turned and stuck her arm inside. Keep going, she told the janitor with a nod. The lift doors slid shut and we were alone. She handed me a prepaid card from her sleeve. Buy 2 drinks and push the coin return twice. Collect what drops and pocket it without looking. I did as told and a tiny key fell. We walked to a restroom and locked a stall. She lifted the tank lid and slid the key into a slot. A panel inside rotated and revealed a small cavity. She pulled out a folded document with fresh ink. Read this now, she held it flat in the air. It named 2 agents and a time at a side entrance. 15 minutes, her eyes finally showed fatigue. We hand them the receipt and we walk. The door swung once as someone tested the handle. A cough scraped the other side and then left. My brother leaned against the partition and breath slow. This ends only one way if they see me. She studied him and then studied me just as hard. We split at the loading gate, her decision landed. He goes right and you go left with me. Meet at the side entrance at 12 after. He shook his head and tucked a strand behind his ear. I do not split from blood when the knives are out. Then you run distraction and let us through. She looked at the ceiling and held 3 fingers up. We stepped into the hall and moved as planned. He broke right and started arguing with a clerk loudly. Faces turned that direction like flowers to a sudden noise. We slipped left and pushed through a gray metal door. The side entrance breathed cooler air and the street murmured. 2 suits stood by a sedan and scanned passers-by. They braced when we approached and kept hands visible. You have something that belongs inside, one murmured. She placed the folded slip on her palm and waited. Before I release it, I want 2 things. A written acknowledgement and visible escort out. He nodded and lifted a badge just enough. Follow protocol, the other instructed with a quick glance. He opened the rear door and gestured to the bench. Inside for 60 seconds, then you walk. Clock starts when the paper touches my hand. I hesitated and checked the corner for familiar shapes. My brother sprinted from the gate with 3 men chasing. He waved both arms and shouted my name once. The suits turned and reached for radios at the same time. Now she pushed the slip into my grip and stepped back. Choose your exit, her eyes bored into mine. My brother closed distance with raw panic and grit. The 3 behind him closed faster with purpose and teeth. I shoved the voucher into the nearest agent's palm. He yanked me into the back seat and slammed the door. My brother's shout hit the glass. As the chasers closed. Clock's running, the agent barked, thumb on a timer. Outside, she cut across the sidewalk and took position. One pursuer lunged and stumbled over her outstretched foot. Another flashed steel and met an agent's baton fast. I pressed my knees together and kept breathing small. Confirmed delivery, the agent demanded, eyes on my hands. Confirmed, my voice landed rough and final. He keyed his mic and called for escort rights. South stair 60 seconds, then separation, hissed the radio. A rap shook the window and my brother's face filled it. You owe me that paper, he growled through clenched teeth. He slapped the door twice and pointed at her. She hides the other half, check her mouth. She turned her head and pushed a folded stub onto her tongue. An agent met her halfway and palmed it clean. He waved the blade man back with one sharp gesture. The third runner circled wide and reached for a phone. The timer hit 10 and the sedan door popped. Left with me, right with her, nobody stalls, the agent ordered. I stepped out as my brother tried to wedge in. A forearm blocked him and he bounced off hard. Walk, she urged, fingers tight on my sleeve. We angled toward the stairwell while radios crackled. Two uniforms formed a moving wall around our path. Somewhere behind us, the blade scraped asphalt like a warning. At the landing, she pressed the receipt into my palm. Trade for a signed acknowledgement, then keep moving. Heavy boots thundered above and a door banged open. We broke into a jog and hit the next flight. My brother burst from a side hall and cut me off. Give me the acknowledgement and I disappear, he panted. I raised my hands and saw the agents closing. Step aside or they cuff you here, I warned. He grabbed for my wrist and I twisted free. An agent hooked his elbow and pinned him to concrete. He fought like a cornered animal and lost ground. Pick a side, he spat, eyes bright with rage. We hit the sublevel and the escort peeled right. A clerk stood ready with a stamp and a form. Sign for custody and release, she instructed, pen already poised. I scribbled and slid the voucher under the slot. Receipt acknowledged, exit clear for 90 seconds. The clerk lifted a gate and pointed to daylight. Move before they close the perimeter, came from her lips. I tucked the stamped page deep and looked back once. My brother twisted loose and made one last sprint. He's aimed at her and not at me now. She didn't flinch, she stepped into him and stopped him cold. An agent snapped cuffs and dragged him toward the car. You planned this, he yelled, voice cracking around pride. Her jaw tightened and she stared past him to me. Walk, she said, almost gentle now, almost kind. I turned toward the street and felt every step weigh. A squad SUV slid to the curb and doors opened. Transport S ready, an officer called, eyes on the crowd. She lifted her wrists without shaking and leaned forward. My brother thrashed once and went quiet under hands. My phone buzzed with a single photo from the building chat. My apartment door stood splintered with tape across the frame. Boxes sat stacked on the landing like a countdown. Under the picture, one message blinked, eviction notice delivered.